Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. How much do you need to have saved up in order to comfortably retire? One of the most common answers to that question is $1 million. And in case no one told you today, you probably don't need $1 million saved up in order to retire. When most people cite that number, they often don't have a logical reason for doing so. In fact, most people who cite the $1 million figure are doing so simply because that's the number society tells us that we should have saved up, or simply because it's a nice round number to say. The number you need is likely very different from that. But there's an opinion piece making quite a splash right now from economist Andrew Briggs that was featured in the Wall Street Journal titled, "You Don't Need to Be a Millionaire to Retire." But the headline in and of itself is not why this article is attracting so much attention, but rather in the article that the author suggests you should be able to have a comfortable enough retirement with a savings of just $50,000 to $100,000. And that flies in the face of practically everything we've been told about saving and investing for retirement. Now, the numbers that he selected are not simply chosen out of thin air. Rather, he cites data from the Federal Reserve looking at actual account balances of current retirees in the real world. And in fact, when we look at median savings and investments for someone at typical retirement age, we do see that account balances are much more modest than what society tells us they should be at retirement age. They are nowhere near seven figures. But this notion that you need seven figures or more to retire is fairly persistent among all generations. But when you break it down by generation, you see that each age group is falling short of these very aspirational goals. So let's take a deeper dive into this proposal. While the reality of what an actual retiree has in their account is much lower than what we see based on recommendations, naturally there's another question. And that is, how are current retirees doing? And I feel like this is kind of a mixed bag, because on the one hand, you see headline after headline how there's a retirement savings crisis. On the other hand, according to the most recent Gallup poll, some 70% of those over the age of 65 are retired. So crisis or not, or less than expected balances in these accounts or not, the vast majority of people in this age group have found a way to retire and step away from the workforce. And if you look at data from the Federal Reserve, when we break things down by age, it is those at or near retirement age who report doing the best financially. In fact, 82% of those aged 60 and older say they're comfortable financially. Further, it's also this age group that's most prepared for a financial emergency, with nearly 70% reporting a fully funded emergency fund. I think these numbers should speak volumes to the fact that many retirees find themselves in a very stable financial position. But I am going to add one caveat here, and that is any survey or any data point should be taken with a grain of salt. Because if you're strategic enough with your questions, you can find data to back up any claim that you're making. But nonetheless, this is the data we have to work with. And plain and simple, the vast majority of retirees do not have anywhere near $1 million saved up for retirement. In fact, if you do have $1 million in investable assets by the age of 65, that puts you in the 79th percentile of Americans. So can you retire with less than $1 million saved up? Absolutely. People do it every single day. For many retirees, there is a heavier reliance on Social Security, and according to Andrew Briggs' estimates, the typical retired couple has annual Social Security benefits of about $46,000. That's just shy of $4,000 a month, and depending on the circumstances you retire into, maybe you retire with a fully paid off home, and depending on which region of the country you live in, maybe this covers most, if not all, of your expenses. When we hear about the recommended amounts needed for investments for retirement, often these recommendations do not factor in other income sources. And a lot of the times these recommendations come from the big financial institutions. The most commonly cited rule of thumb when it comes to how much you should have saved up for retirement comes from Fidelity, suggesting that you should have a certain multiple of income in investments. And by the time you reach full retirement age of 67, that you should have roughly 10 times your income saved up in investable assets in order to comfortably step away from the workforce. So if you have a household income of $70,000 a year, you would want $700,000 in investable assets saved up by the time you're 67, if that's when you step away from the workforce. Fidelity then assumes that you would use a safe rate of withdrawal, something in the ballpark of 4.5%. And in this instance, this would provide our retiree with an income of $31,500 just from investments. The biggest critique of this planning technique is that it is based off income rather than expenses. And when it comes down to it, when planning for your retirement, it is much more appropriate to base things off your expected expenses in retirement. Also consider the source of who is telling us that we might need these lofty sums for retirement, the big financial institutions. They have a vested interest in telling people to have a substantial amount in investments. That is literally their business. That is literally how they make money. We could liken this to engagement rings. How do you decide how much you should spend on an engagement ring? Let's go back for a moment. Prior to World War II, when roughly only 10% of engagement rings had diamonds, but then a jeweler came along and changed all of that. De Beers, with their slogan of "A diamond is forever." Then, in 1977, De Beers came along and took it one step further and told people exactly how much they should be spending on an engagement ring, with their new ad campaign asking, "How can you make 2 months' salary last forever?" This campaign came out nearly 50 years ago, and right or wrong, it still influences how much people spend on engagement rings today. A jewelry store suggesting how much you should spend on jewelry seems like a clear conflict of interest. An investment brokerage house suggesting how much you should have invested when they make their money off you investing with them seems like a conflict of interest. So take their recommendations with a grain of salt. Most of these savings recommendations are based off conservative rates of withdrawal, and conservative or safe rates of withdrawal are designed to make your entire portfolio last throughout your entire retirement. Most of these safe rates of withdrawal are not spend-down methods. According to William Bengen, the founder of the 4% rule, 96% of retirees who follow this rate of withdrawal actually end up with more money on a nominal basis than they started retirement with. Now, on the one hand, where I think brokerage houses are more apt to suggest more aggressive savings benchmarks, I do believe that Andrew Briggs suggests retirement savings that are too conservative. Yes, while many of today's retirees' account balances might be on the lower side, I think today's retirees retired into a landscape that is very different than what future generations are looking at. Most notably, according to the Federal Reserve, 56% of current retirees aged 65 and older have a pension. And a pension greatly influences and greatly reduces how much you need to have invested and saved up for retirement. And pensions are far less common today. Consider the generation right behind today's retirees, Gen X. According to the National Institute on Retirement Security, only 14% of Gen X members currently work for an employer who offers a pension. And without a pension as a safety net, that definitely changes the dynamic of retirement and how much is necessary to save for it. Also, we have to consider that Social Security is going to undergo some sort of reform. Currently, Social Security is projected to run a shortfall as early as 2035 without any sort of changes. Now, I do believe that changes will be made. Maybe they'll increase the age at which people are eligible to claim benefits. Maybe they'll reduce the benefit payouts. Or maybe they'll change the way we tax current workers. Maybe it'll be a mixture of any and all of these. Interestingly enough, Andrew Briggs, the author of this Wall Street Journal opinion piece, actually proposed structural changes to 401k plans to help prop up Social Security in a recent paper. And I did a video going over that I will link above and down below if you're interested. So I think knowing that there are forthcoming changes to Social Security and how so many of today's workers do not have the safety net of a pension, suggesting that you can have a comfortable or secure retirement on such a low-level savings is not fitting for the masses. Honestly, I think both of these approaches represent the extreme ends. I think if you have a solid pension and Social Security, you may be able to get away with retiring on very limited amounts in investments. You may never even need to touch your investments, but I don't think that's going to be the thing that works for most people going forward. On the flip side, making the blanket statement that everyone needs 10x or 20x their income in order to step into retirement seems very aggressive. It fails to consider individual goals and individual expenses. Is this someone who wants to pass down a legacy or simply fund their own retirement? Is this someone who's currently paying a mortgage or are they currently debt-free? All of these types of questions are going to influence what your number should be. Truly, I think for the vast majority of people, the real solution is going to lie somewhere between both of these extremes. Do you need to have 7 figures invested and saved up in order to have a successful retirement? No, people retire all the time without that level of investments. But does that also mean that you should go into retirement with very minimal savings and investments? Again, I would say no to this. I personally don't agree with this limited savings approach for upcoming retirees and younger generations, but I do really like that this is a topic of conversation because I feel like so often when people hear about a 7-figure benchmark, they can feel discouraged if they aren't anywhere close to that. And what I do really think is important is that you figure out a number that works best for you. That's not going to be a number that you read about in some mass publication, and it's likely not going to be some number that's in a marketing publication for a brokerage house. I am very conservative in nature, and I want to err on the side of over-saving and over-investing because I'm the type of person who will ask 1,000 what-if questions and then wonder about the price tag of those 1,000 what-if questions. If I'm stepping away from the workforce, I want to be as prepared as possible. Personally, I would not be comfortable stepping away from the workforce with $50,000 or $100,000 in investments and then never working again. The good news is that there's a solution to all of this. If you're willing to simply save 10 to 20% of your income throughout the course of your entire working career and invest it, you will likely end up in a very good financial position. And if you start early enough, you will easily end up a millionaire or even a multimillionaire. What level of savings do you think you need in order to retire comfortably? Leave your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye.